Hey, it's Minute Book Reports, and this is my final reading update for War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. If you stuck around the entire time watching me from part 1 to part 4 now, I really appreciate it. It's been a very interesting experience in sort of logging my reading sort of thoughts as I'm reading the book. And then of course I'm going to work on the drawing, animation, picture, video to summarize the entire story. But this has been fun for me. This has been good for me. I'm glad. This is my first video back after a long hiatus, and so it was good. It was a short book, very easy to read, but I do want to talk about a couple of things that particularly happened in this section of the book and then my overall thoughts on the entire book as a whole. The main thing I want to talk about though is the meeting with the artilleryman. This is significant in the story, and I was trying to figure out why this was so significant. Obviously, when the main man meets the artilleryman, it's sort of an awkward discussion because they had met earlier in the story when they were both trying to hide from the aliens, and the Martians had first attacked. But in this scene, a lot has happened since then. It's only been, I think, less than maybe 20 or so days, but a lot has happened. And the artilleryman sort of explains this, I guess, his outlook now and what he sees in the future of humanity in terms of how to rebuild it. So basically what he wants to do is he's sort of conceded that the Martians are going to control everything, but there's going to be a small group of survivors, and they're going to like survive in the sewers under London, or they're just going to kind of like keep hidden until eventually one day they'll sort of rise and take over the Martians when they're not really prepared. It's sort of like a Planet of the Apes type of thing where the humans will become sort of the pets or the entertainment, and then eventually over time maybe they'll wise up and at the right moment they'll strike. So it was this really odd plan he had. His outlook was very, very strange. And of course the man ends up leaving the artilleryman because I think he senses something is not right with him. You know, I know that as they're digging that hole to go into the sewers, the guy's thinking, why don't we just go down the manhole? It's right there. It's really easy. But there's like that the artilleryman is so focused on just digging this hole that he doesn't think clearly. So I was trying to figure out what the purpose of the artilleryman meeting at the end. Now, their discussion, their talk reveals a lot about sort of, I guess, the insignificance of humans and how, for the most part, we're the ones that are sort of conquering. You know, we have sort of the domain over the earth as it is right now, but they're talking about how maybe our perspective can change from this experience. How because we were in the position of sort of the ants, they keep making that comparison between us and ants, then now we have a better perspective on the things that we have that dominion over. I was still trying to figure out why is this interaction so important? You know, besides some of that perspective change, why is it so important? And for me, what I got out of it was the artilleryman serves as a measuring stick, as a before and after sort of picture. They both start off, the artilleryman and the main character, the narrator, they both encounter the Martian attack at the same time. They're obviously at very different roles, but they're both stuck in the house in the beginning of the story, and then they sort of split off and do their own thing. When they come back again, the narrator, to me, it hasn't changed all that much. But we see the artilleryman and how much he's changed, and his way of thinking has changed so much. And I think by having that contrast, you're able to sort of see how people can change. It's sort of like when people graduate from high school and they go off to college, or they move somewhere and then they come back, right? There's a sense of how the people that stayed haven't quite changed, and then the people who left, they changed quite a bit. This happened to me when I went away for college, where I grew up, I lived in the same place for my whole life, and then I went away for 4 years, and I came back, and it was very much the same. You know, there was a sameness about the routines, the sameness about not just the weather, but just sort of the patterns and the culture, which is what I was hoping would happen. I mean, that's what you hope to sort of see when you return back home. But it was so different because people told me when I came back, oh, you're so different. You know, you changed so much. And I'm like, I haven't. I just was myself. But I was put in a new environment, and I feel like in this interaction with the artilleryman, we see a very big difference between the man, the narrator, who is sort of like, I guess, the stable, if you can even count that in the sort of alien takeover narrative. And then we have the artilleryman who's been gone and who's been trying to survive and scraping by. And when we first meet him, I think he has like a sword he's holding up. So he's you know, he's rugging it. He's out there, you know, and his mind has just changed so much, and that interaction allows us to see that. So my overall thoughts on this story are, well, first of all, I'm glad that this is the first book I'm reading coming back to making these videos. It wasn't a very long book. The total read time was roughly about 7 hours. So I'm just adding up all the read times that I had. I probably could have finished it a little sooner, but in the first 3 chapters, like I mentioned, I fell asleep, so it kind of threw off my reading time a little bit. But 7 hours to read the entire book, which is pretty reasonable, I think. And again, that's a pretty average to maybe moderate pace. What I like about this book is that it feels very classic, if that's a thing. Like, I feel like it helps to establish a lot of this genre in science fiction, not just in books, but also in film and television and other types of media that we see today. I mentioned this before, I'm not a huge fan of the narrative structure, the way that we have a first-person perspective, sort of recalling a story where we don't know the character's name, and we know that the character survives. So I'm not a huge fan of that type of storytelling, but it does make it sort of, I guess, historic in a way, to make it sound like these events actually happened and that we're then moving forward going to rebuild on what we learned through this experience. I don't know, in a sense this story is about survival, but again, it's more about humanity. I feel like if there's anything that people get out of this story, it's that while it looks like it's a aliens versus humans story, it's really a humanity sort of centered, I guess, illustration. I mean, the point is to look at ourselves in this story and how do we react? How does us being these, you know, at this sort of stable level, when we have to react or sort of interact with an alien race, I think how we react shows a lot about ourselves, and we never get to see that if we never have to interact with any sort of outside civilizations, outside cultures. And again, this sort of expands out to not just on a sort of planetary level, but I think also a very cultural level too. I mentioned before about the idea of change, and if we stay in our same cultures, we don't get a chance to interact with other cultures and sort of see who we are. And very much this book does that about, I guess, the human nature or just our society. When we're challenged, when we're sort of roughed a little bit, how do we react? What is our natural instinct? What do we do? And this book explores a lot of those things. And I think that can get overlooked in this sort of space sci-fi thriller, that it seems like it's good guys versus bad guys. But if you notice, the ending is very not really exciting. There's no space battle. There's no big explosion. There's no person who has to sacrifice it all, which we typically see in these types of movies, where there's like a character who hits the button and then they explode, or they make the ultimate sacrifice for all of humanity, for the entire planet. But we don't have that in this story. It's very sort of peaceful at the end. No conflict, no fight to resolve this story. It just naturally happens because the Martians just die from the bacteria. So what are we left with? There's no heroic moment. And I think that allows us to take a look at ourselves, the survivors of this attack, this interaction with the Martians. well, how to react. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed not just this video, but the entire series. And I'm gonna work on that drawing summary video very, very soon. But this was really good for me, and thank you for being a part of this. If you watch all the videos, I really appreciate it. So thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.